not perfect, he might still beat you. Not just because he's very fast, but he can fling that ball down the field too. And on top of that, guys, who's he throwing to? I know Goff has a bunch of good receivers. He has DeAndre Hopkins. So when you say trust, this is what I'm asking. The game is on the line. You are facing one of these two. You're a fan of the other team. Stephen A., it's your Steelers or your Packers because of Aaron Rodgers, whatever. Or Molly, it's your Giants. And they're facing either the Rams or Arizona. And it's a one-score game, and one of those two quarterbacks has the ball in his hand. Who do you fear more? That tells you what you need to know. You fear Kyler Murray more, especially throwing to Hopkins. You trust him more if you're a fan of the team than you would trust Goff.
Well, here's the deal. If the question was fear, I say Kyler Murray. If the question was trust, I'm going to go with Jared Goff because I'm going to trust somebody that beat Russell Wilson and Tom Brady this year. That hasn't been Kyler Murray. Now, Kyler Murray has lost 3 of the last 4 to Miami, to Seattle, to New England. We get all of that. There were times that we thought that Arizona was about to ascend, and then they came up being relatively disappointing. And that might not be Kyler Murray's fault. It might be Cliff Kingsbury's fault, which is something that we'll get into a little bit later on in the show. But nevertheless, when I look at Kyler Murray, obviously he's a sensational talent. He's got some wheels on him, the likes of which we haven't seen outside of Lamar Jackson. He's the best running quarterback in the National Football League. He's just got those kind of wheels on him. He's something special. We get all of that. He's relatively miniature in the pocket. I think that defenses intensify come playoff time. Inclement weather comes into the equation as well. And obviously he can run out of the backfield as a quarterback and make some things happen. But in terms of throwing that football, I'm not so sure. It's one thing to throw the deep ball. It's another thing to hit intermediate routes, whether it's to Hopkins or Fitzgerald or anybody else. And by the way, we wish Larry Fitzgerald nothing but the best because we know he came down. Didn't he come down with COVID-19, if I remember correctly? We just wish him the best. But the bottom line is that when you look at Arizona, there's some question marks. When I look at Jared Goff, he's been there. Now, obviously, he stunk up the joint against Miami weeks ago. I didn't like that. But again, he beat Russell Wilson and Tom Brady in back-to-back weeks. Obviously won a game against Chicago, even though that wasn't necessarily saying much because of their quarterback situation. We know what he's been doing with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Higbee and Josh Reynolds and those boys. Hasn't had, even though the running game is decent, the bottom line, this is not what it was years ago when Gurley was there. In the end, though, because he's been there and because he has McVay, I think that's where the trust factor, the word trust, really becomes a paramount, Max. Do I trust Kingsbury with Kyler Murray? That remains to be seen. I trust McVay, especially after he struggled a little bit last year. I thought he went a long way towards making amends this year, sort of reeling Jared Goff in for the most part. And I think that with the weapons that they have, the familiarity that they have with one another, I'm going to roll with Jared Goff when it comes to the word trust between those two just for this particular season.
Look, we were very, very high on Kyler Murray earlier in the season. And then look at what he ran into. A lot of it is schedule, right? They lost a close one to Miami. Miami is a very good team this year, as we know. They beat the Bills in a tough one, so that's a win. But the Bills are a very good team. Then they lose to the Seahawks, who they'd already beaten, another tough team. And then they get the Patriots, and they lose to the Patriots. And I think that's why, at the moment, see, Goff has a bigger resume. So a few bad games doesn't eat into your confidence about him the way it will with a quarterback with a shorter resume, right? Like each game represents a bigger percentage of what we know about him on the NFL level. And he just lost to the Patriots by a field goal. And you look at the Patriots, you go, they're nothing to write home about. But I keep bringing up, they're a game of under 500, the Patriots. They went through a period of COVID where they lost several games, and yet they're 2 plays away from being 7-4. Patriots are better than you realize. And more importantly, he came up against Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick can scheme a defensive plan for anyone to make them look bad. And so I think at this moment, the way we view Kyler Murray will tend to underrate him a little bit coming off that Patriots loss. By the way, think about, I brought up the Super Bowl with Goff. Imagine holding Tom Brady and the Patriots to 13 points and losing, right? Your defense plays really well. You hold the opponents to 13 points in the Super Bowl and you lose because you can only muster 9. I hold that against Goff, but also consider who he was being coached against. Bill Belichick schemed up a way to keep that Rams offense offense to single digits in a Super Bowl. So I think the fact that Belichick, even with less talent, can scheme up a way to beat Arizona by a field goal and limit them to 17 points is not an enormous indictment, in fact, on Kyler Murray. And game on the line, give me Kyler Murray over Jared Goff. I trust him more.
Well, first of all, we're not indicting Kyler Murray at all. It's only his second season in the league. So we're not indicting him. We know that he has a tremendous upside. You remember, he's the #1 overall pick, and nobody regrets it. You have people regretting Baker Mayfield, wondering whether or not, the Cleveland Browns, what kind of decision are they going to have to make? Because obviously, if you pay Baker Mayfield a boatload of money, you're going to compromise what else you want to do on your football team because they've got a hard salary cap in the National Football League. Nobody's talking about that with Kyler Murray. It might be a little bit too early to talk contract, but when you talk about him being the #1 overall pick, who's debated that? Who's questioned that? Who's looked at Kyler Murray and say, what the hell were the Arizona Cardinals thinking? Nobody has said that because the little brother's a stud. We know that he can ball. But again, trust is not just about him. It's about his chemistry and camaraderie with the players that he's playing with. And it's about, Cliff Kingsbury. You're really showing that he's worthy of being plucked out of college when he didn't even win on that level to be an NFL head coach, which, again, we will get into as this show progresses. In the end, when I think about Jared Goff, I'm thinking about 3,000 plus yards passing already. I'm thinking about him completing 67% of his passes. I'm thinking about the fact that he's beaten Russell Wilson and Tom Brady in back-to-back weeks. I'm thinking about the fact that he has Sean McVay as his head coach, along with reliable weapons that he has already cultivated a relationship with over the years in Woods and Kupp, and now you got Reynolds producing for them as well. I just look at it from that perspective, combined with the Rams defense. Again, it's really about a trust question with Goff and Kyler as opposed to the Rams and Cardinals. I understand that. But I do think that you have to take those things into consideration in terms of trying to define whether or not you should trust Goff. And right now, based on what we're seeing, I have more trust for Goff as the season progresses because I think he's working with less stringent conditions or less difficult conditions than Kyler Murray is working with right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Goff needs everything perfect, and still he may not get it done. Kyler Murray doesn't. In fact, it's interesting you brought up Baker Mayfield because all four teams, all four quarterbacks really, but the four teams that we talked about in this segment, Stephen A., in this A block, including Tannehill, by the way, because we're talking about Titans, though we didn't bring him up. He was a first-round bust, but then coaching made a big difference. He's a good quarterback now. Baker Mayfield went first overall, Goff went first overall, and Kyler Murray went first overall. Which team do you think regrets it least? Which team do you think is happiest that they took that guy first overall? My answer would be Kyler Murray. And that's another way of me saying I trust him more than Jared Goff.
All right, we got to leave it there, guys. There's another team in this division I want to talk about, another quarterback, Sierra's husband, let Russ cook. Yeah, we'll get into that in just a moment. Plus, Sierra's NBA husband to get into.
I like that.
Yes, Sierra she is something special, as you would say, Stephen A. Should Harden want to stay in Houston?